Welcome to our almost last event of this year's autumn school in philosophy, economics, and political science. Our last debate is actually focusing on the theme which was the overall theme of our previous edition from last year, which was entitled "The Minimal State as a Solution for Romania." We are going to repeat a little bit of it for you. And before anything else, I want to tell you that last year we published a supplement in Magazine 22, which contains a brief overview of everything that was discussed by means of dedicated articles. And unfortunately, we do not have enough copies to give you hard copies, but I wrote you there on the paper the address from which you can download it in full. It's also published on the internet for free. The main idea which constitutes the start of our discussion is the opposite of our debate's title. So if our debate title refers to the perspectives of the minimal state, it is logical to begin with the question, what makes the state grow? We are aware, it is easy to observe that the state finds itself in a permanent process of growth in both budget as proportion of the economy, as well as in regulations, in the size, the spread, and the quantity, generally speaking, of all kinds of regulations. This happens year after year after year after year. The question is why? And two important authors gave the correct answer sometimes maybe 30 years ago. They are called Anthony Downs and William Niskanen. I will write you their names on paper later on. They asked the same question, and their answer was the following. The state is made out of departments and people. These people can be either politicians or civil service or basically any other public employee. The personal interests of each and every one of them is to increase his own power and money. They are exchangeable, the two things. You can get more money by having more power. You can gain more power by having more money. Therefore, what is actually taking place is that every of these persons and their departments from within the whole bureaucracy of the state is permanently trying to gather more and more resources. And there are two types of resources they gather. One is money, that is, they increase their budgets as much as possible. And B, they increase their power by giving themselves as many attributions as possible by regulations. The generalization of this theory can also be found at Elinor Ostrom's institutional analysis and development framework. It's not concerning with this particular problem, but it is the general theory which explains how this actually works. So I will write down the names I said earlier. In my contribution to this supplement last year, I brought another generalization, in another direction. And I said there that what we are dealing with is a systematic disalignment of interests between all these people that I mentioned working for the state and their constituencies or the communities they serve. Thus, you are certain to find a disalignment of interest between, for example, the local police station and the interests of the community which is served by this police section, for instance, in having safety or having patrols. Basically, you may know this generalization under the name of the principal agent problem, which describes the different interests of two parties to any contract, by which one party employs another one to do something, anything. The theory is showing that it's very easy to understand that while the principal, which is the employer, and in our case, the society or a community, and the employee, which is in our case, the state or any of its small divisions, subdivisions, employees, and so on, there will be a difference of interest. The interests will not be 100% aligned, but rather maybe sometimes even opposed already, but however, largely disaligned. Having said this, we are going to focus our discussion on the more normative level at which we are asking ourselves which are the perspectives of the minimal state, that is, of the perspectives for complete change of direction in the process which I just described. So if the process which is taking place naturally and every day is a process of increasing the state by its own power, by its own action, we must ask now if it is possible and how to reverse this trend towards one of state minimization. And we invited extraordinary lecturers and panelists today. I will start with Professor Emanuel Socaciu from the Faculty of Philosophy in the University of Bucharest. Then I will invite Radu Șimandan from the Polytechnic University of Bucharest. And afterwards, Ovidiu Neacșu from the Society for Individual Liberty, who will be followed by a presentation from Andrei Trandafira from CADI Eleutheria, and we are going to end with a presentation of Octavian-Jora from the Academy of Economic Studies. So without further delay, Emmy, you have the floor.
It's great to be here at this event. It's great to see so many veterans here, so many people who we met 10 years ago and then almost yearly. And I just want to start by saying that I'm very sorry I couldn't attend more this year. Now I was wondering when I saw the title of the debate, to what extent is it supposed to be a follow-up to the whole 3 days of discussions about the minimal state last year. And I'll just pick up in the beginning where Horia left and ask whether there's really such a disalignment. I mean, this is the typical, usual explanation that we give. It's a standard explanation about the growth of the state and the growth of bureaucracy. But on the other hand, it rests on a kind of assumption that might be, in a way, problematic. The assumption is that actually the individuals who are pressing in the public sphere for the growth of the state are somehow misrepresenting their own interests. So there might be if you look around, if you look on surveys, if you look on sociological studies, Probably there's a large majority of our fellow citizens all over the world uh, who really believe that the state should fix things. And the pressure on the political system from the voters is that the political system provides, at least nominally, the fixing. Right? If the constituents ask for the state to come in and solve various issues, the rational politicians, uh, we fully agree on the assumption that these are very rational, self-interested people there. The rational politician will eventually comply, or and then after the decision that the bureaucracy uh, will, or the state will come in and do the fixing, then the dynamics of the growth for the department that's in charge of the fixing is probably the dynamics that you described earlier. But I think it is at least partly problematic to say that the disalignment of interest between the political actors, the bureaucrats, and the constituents is so radical. Uh, Except if we assume that the constituents asking for the state to step in do not, are unable to identify and formulate their own interests. But this is just a very was just a very short commentary on picking up where you left the discussion. What I was prepared to do was briefly talk about the general question and let's say the intellectual theoretical foundations of the minimal state. And I gave a talk last year on the topic, and my thesis was that the relation between classical liberalism, libertarianism, and the minimal state can best be described as a failed romance, in the sense that Cosmopolitan would talk about a failed romance. And why do I say that? There are many reasons. I'm not going to go into detail now, but a first very simple observation: look at the major authors in the liberal tradition. How many supporters of the minimal state will you find? Give me 5 supporters of the minimal state in the technical term, in the technical sense of the term. Can you find 5 major authors supporting the minimal state? So you have Nozick, you have maybe Spencer, you have maybe Basquiat. Debatably, you might have Mises, but there's a discussion here. And then Milton Friedman, it's debatable if he supported the minimal state in the technical sense, because when he talks about the state coming in to solve neighborhood effects and so on and so forth, there's already a productive function of the state that goes beyond the minimal state. Hayek admits a sort of safety net provision which goes beyond the minimal state. So my thesis here is that among the major canonical thinkers in the liberal tradition, the vast majority of them are either authors who support more than the minimal state, or authors who are anarchists. So it's either anarchy or a state, a limited state with some positive agenda, so not just a minimal state. And why is that? Why is that? Is it an accident of history that we don't have so many important theories of the minimal state? I mean, basically, the only one that I know in political philosophy that's full-fledged, it's Robert Nozick's. And I don't think it's an accident of history. I think that the minimal state is not the kind of concept that mobilizes us intellectually. So it cannot create intellectual passion. It's not the kind of solution that can win votes in the public discussion. And there are other shortcomings that I'm not going to cover here. So then what do we support? Do we strictly support the minimal state? I think an important job for philosophers is just to clarify the assumptions and the language. And what I want to ask here is, what actually are we talking about? Are we talking about the minimal state, again, in the technical sense of the term, where the state is limited strictly to the enforcement of property rights and contracts? Or are we talking in a more metaphorical sense? To quote Elizabeth Thatcher, we want just to press for rolling back the state from society. And I think actually there's this double meaning is always at play. So sometimes when people say I support the minimal state, they just want to say I would like the state to do less than it does, not really support the minimal state. So briefly, maybe if necessary, I can elaborate more in the Q&A. There's the short article in the supplement that Horia mentioned before, where I explain this in a bit more detail. But briefly, my answer to the question of the panel is that if we talk about the minimal state, meaning actually minimal state, I don't think the prospect is too optimistic. So the chances for the minimal state, understood as minimal state, are not great, both at the theoretical and the political level, I would say. But you know what? I'm not sorry for that. I'm not sorry that the prospects are not great. I think it's good in a sense that they're not great, and we are in a good intellectual neighborhood with that. With Adam Smith, with Hayek, with Milton Friedman, with almost you name any major author in the classical liberal tradition, and you would have something else than the minimal state. On the other hand, if we mean by that just less state, a lot less state than we have, then I do hope the prospects are optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic because of the pressure from the voters to have the state doing things. And I think we should push also in our discourse. I think we should push more towards minimizing the state, making the state less big, and not so much on using the label minimal state, which again I think is quite risky from many points of view. But I stop here.
Why not always plan the economy, and why not always plan the entire society? One answer that has been given to this question is simply because we don't know enough in order to plan effectively. Of course, that famous answer that Friedrich Hayek gives to this question. His probably most famous article from the American Economic Review is this one, The Use of Knowledge in Society. What Hayek believes is that, and he says it in the Constitution of Liberty, no human mind can comprehend all the knowledge which guides the action of society. What a free society offers to the individual, it's much more than what he would be able to do if only he were free. So his support of liberty relies exactly on this rationalization. Information is dispersed in society, and the good use of information it's when it is used by private individuals and not by state agencies. Another quote from Hayek is from another book of his. By the way, both books that I'm quoting here are translated in Romanian. He says in The Fatal Conceit, The Errors of Socialism from 1998, which is in fact his last book, the curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. Hayek therefore argued that information is decentralized and that knowledge is unevenly dispersed among different members of society, and that as a result decisions are best made by those with local knowledge rather than by a central authority. This is the main argument of Hayek in favor of a free society. This idea, this set of ideas, I believe have a number of applications. First application is the so-called we know problem. Too many times politicians and policymakers have this mindset. They say we know better. For instance, they can use expressions like this. Our calculations show that. We should do this. We should do that. Our country should do this. We need this or that. We should achieve this end, and in order to achieve it, we should implement this or that program. Well, as Hayek says, it's a problem with this way of seeing things. Usually, we don't know how Hayek labels this is the pretense of knowledge. A good idea would be to have a yardstick, a measuring device, by which to judge the truthfulness or the realism of politicians and policymakers. And I propose this yardstick. I think we should observe this when debating public policies or economic policies, such as the monetary policy or the fiscal policy or fiscal matters in general. We should ask how many times we should observe and ask how many times politicians, policymakers say, for instance, we don't know, or there is no reliable way for us to know. And I believe that the more they say things like this, the more sincere they are. Sometimes, or rather too many times, policymakers want to give this impression that they know everything and that they can achieve everything. And this is wrong, I believe. Another application is this, the excessive use of technical language. For instance, in economics, in publicly debating economics. Too many times communicators make use of excessively technical language. A few expressions, a few technical terms, in economics are these, like structural deficit, or cyclically adjusted budget balance, or cyclically adjusted deficit, the potential GDP. I agree that all these terms are good terms in economics. They are useful, but I believe they have no use in political communication. In fact, when they are first introduced in textbooks, I think they should come with this warning. Not to be used by politicians. In fact, if they are used by politicians, this is very useful for us because we can understand more about them. But better not to have them used because probably they try to deceive us. Another application of Hayek's ideas of the knowledge problem is related to economic forecasts. The government, as we can see, is involved in the economic forecast business. For instance, in Romania, we have the famous, or rather the infamous, National Commission for Strategy and Prognosis. Now the question is, does these agencies, or in general the government, does the government do a good job? Well, what we can observe is that the private sector is doing a better job predicting the future. It's very complicated to predict the future. I would say it's too important to be left to the government. And there are two sets of reasons for this. First, there's the moral hazard problem. A private enterprise risks its own money or the money of its shareholders, whereas the state may lose other people's money. Another famous expression, other people's money. And that's a moral hazard problem. Another reason we should agree that the government is not merely making economic predictions. It tries to influence or to manipulate the future for political gain. So the so-called mistakes might not be real mistakes, but expectations altering devices. Let's call them this way. So when we hear a politician saying something about economic or about the evolution of future measures in economics, they seem to be wrong, they are proven to be wrong. Yes, but those probably aren't real predictions. What they are trying to do is to influence things. There's the so-called self-fulfilling prophecies. So I agree we should not judge them too harsh. They're not making predictions. My conclusion related to the government being involved in the forecast business is that we should be cautious about governmental economic forecasts. A larger conclusion could be we should have a minimal state because we do not know enough to use a maximal state, or to use it effectively, at least. The minimal state does a better job at managing dispersed knowledge.
As Horia said, there are many fields of human activity that have been taken over, and there are so-called public goods and services that are being provided by the state. And just because we don't know or we don't see how they could be provided privately doesn't mean that there's no way to do that. As an economist, I have to start by saying that human economic activity is the constant search for solutions to problems and ways to use limited resources, among which is there's also time, to be used as for the unlimited needs and the recurring needs that we have. So every resource that we waste and every year or unit of time that we waste is lost forever. And to be able to find new solutions to these problems, we should be open to suggestions from private actors and not hinder private initiative. And I will start with a couple of examples, some of which might sound familiar to you. In Romania, a rather poor country of the European Union, an NGO is building a hospital with 26 million euros from donations from more than 200,000 people and around 2,000 companies. You probably know the initiative Dăruiește Viață with the hospital at Marie Curie in Bucharest. And okay, that's Romania, but there are examples from even poorer countries from all over the world where private initiative has come in to provide cheap healthcare. For example, in India, half of eye care is provided by NGOs sponsored by through donations. Some of them generous donations from outside India, but also from wealthy people in the country. Polio, 2 out of 3 strains of the polio virus, who causes horrific diseases and a high mortality rate, have been eradicated throughout the world through an initiative started in 1983, I think, by the Rotary Club, a private initiative to which the World Health Organization and several governments throughout the world have participated, indeed. And I have an example from Romania where, from some reason, everyone thinks that the national railway system still needs to be held by the state. The first railroad in Romania was built between Bucharest and Sinaia, of course, because that's where the king had his summer palace. But the second one, that is now in Romania, was built between Cernavodă and Constanța in 1860 by a group of British serial traders who thought, it takes so long to sail a ship all the way up the Danube, through the Danube Delta, into Constanța. You had to switch ships in Brăila so you can navigate on the sea, and it took a lot of time. And they went to the Ottoman Empire, who ruled Dobrogea back then, got a charter, built a port in Cernavodă, invested in the port of Constanța, and built a railway, a steam-operated railway from Cernavodă to Constanța. And for some reason, today we don't think someone could build their own railway, a company or a group of investors in Romania. And aside from building a railway, they were also operating a postal service along the railway, another one of the prides of Romania. We have examples of people who have tried to build or rebuild a bridge or a piece of road in their village or town, just because they got tired of waiting. And what I'm going with this is, if there is private initiative, most times it's stopped, hindered, or even punished by the state. And as I see it, we should be at least arguing in favor of an opt-out system, where if you wanted to find private insurance for your healthcare, you should be able to do it and stop paying taxes to the state. If you wanted to choose insurance for your pension fund, you should be able to stop paying insurance to the bankrupt pay-as-you-go system. The same, I would say, could be done to the education system. There are several proposals to switch to a voucher system where the state does pay each student an equal amount of money, divides the budget of the education, the Ministry of Education equally, and then each parent / child takes their voucher to the school of choice. And I know that will not be enough. Of course, there's not enough money. That's always the counter argument. As a counter argument to the counter argument, in 2009, a foundation financed by several big donors in the US and throughout the world has started bridge academies, that's the name, in India, in poor communities where people earn less than $2 per day. Last year, they had reached 600 schools with 120,000 students in 5 different countries in Asia. Again, less than $2 per day. So I would say that there's no money or there's not enough money is an argument that does not stand, especially in Romania. And I would even go as far to say that the sharing and the gig economy are ways to look for a less influence of the state in people's affairs, especially since it's not keeping up with the innovation in those fields. Ideas come up, new businesses come up, and then the state gets taken by surprise and reacts to competition, to license taxis, to competition to license hotels. And nowadays the electric scooters have probably done more to ease the burden of traffic than the local authorities have done in the past 30 years. And I want to end by saying, I don't know. If anyone asks, so what's the market solution to whatever thing? I don't know. If I knew, I'd be a billionaire by now, and probably not be talking to you here. But let's give that initiative, the private initiative, a chance to appear and develop, and not just say, well, it's probably not possible. Don't open up. Don't give a license. Don't allow for competition to a state-owned monopoly. Thank you.
Okay, so I will pick up on what Amy said in the beginning. Assume that you already are in agreement with what he said. So I would rephrase, we have the question, what are the prospects of the minimal state? So I would rephrase it a bit because there are 2 aspects in this. Imagine, so let's make an imaginary example. We are on the new planet and we have to decide to build a new society, okay? So the first question is not about the state, it's about what we as a society would want to provide as public services and goods. In the classical approach of minimal state, this set of functions is limited. It's like security, grant, enforcement of contracts, and functioning of market, maybe, whatever. And in a more broad set of functions, we could also want some kind of welfare, some kind of safety net, education, healthcare, and stuff like that. Okay, so this is the first part. And the second part is, once we settle this issue, how do we provide for it? And only here, the classical answer was, sure, by the state. We make some hierarchical central organization. We put some people there in power and in charge of it to make sure they will provide all this that we want. So these are two very different things, because now imagine the 2 options in this in our example. So in one situation, we choose for the classical minimal state. We say we want only security and contracts assurement and stuff like that. But we make a classical state to take care about it. And in the other situation, imagine that we are more like we want also some kind of safety net for the poor and stuff like that, but we don't use the state to provide. We use a different kind of institutional arrangement. And imagine that there is such an arrangement that you don't need external third party like the state to enforce stuff. Okay, so I hope, and imagine which would be better off in these situations, the guys which give limited functions to the state, but try to provide for it in a classical etatist, statist manner, and the others which have a broader functions for collective action, but they manage to provide it in a different way. Usually the response from the libertarians is that if we could have free market, provide these functions would be much more efficient. Okay, so now it comes the second part. So there are recent technologies which are not industrial technologies, so they just don't improve how fast you build, how more you build, but they are institutional technologies, which means that they are greatly improving the transactions cost, which are monitoring costs, enforcement costs, and a lot of type of costs. This is probably the most well-known name that you heard about. It is Bitcoin, okay? So Bitcoin is well-known because it started and it appears a lot in the media, stuff like that. So in short, I will tell very shortly how it started. So it started after the economic crisis in 2008, and the point was how it would be if we could make a new system in which we don't need third parties like the banks to assure us that the money we send, the money we keep are safe. Okay, so it's a new system which is a type of distributed ledger, which is completely decentralized. And basically, to understand in a very simple example, imagine that each of us, each individual, has on his phone the complete list of transactions that any one of us makes with each other. And they cannot be changed. Once they are made, this is assured by mathematics. I won't go into the technical details, but it's based on mathematics and it's 100% proven that you cannot falsify or stuff like that. And any time a new transaction is made, like between me and Emi, each of one will have a copy of this new updated ledger, and everyone will know that we made it. And not only that we made it. Once we made it, we cannot change it. And the algorithm that we agreed on having in place will also assure that our agreement will be automatically enforced. So say if I promise him I will give 10% of my earnings in 1 month, when that will happen, the algorithm will execute the obligation. And I cannot do anything about not fulfilling my contract. So, okay, so I don't know if it's the case to enter too much into details of this technology, but it's basically completely transparent. It cannot be falsified. It will keep the entire history of all the transactions, and this involves being able to make a contract with somebody anywhere on the planet that you don't have any idea about him, and to have certainty that the contract will be binding without the need of a third party like about the need of a notary or enforcement of like any kind of institution that will institution in the classical sense, like organization, like government or stuff like that, because the institution becomes precisely the network of all of us which are connected through this kind of technology. Okay. So basically, there are two different stuff. How much we want to provide for us as a society, and what kinds of stuff, and how to do it. And the problem till now was that the main answer was, sure, we do it with the state. And what happens, Horia already told, and the state will become bigger and bigger and stuff like that. And once we can change this, and this is now is possible. It might take a lot of time, I don't know, but it's the technical part of monitoring, of enforcement, and of solving the information asymmetry, and basically all kinds of transactions costs can be greatly reduced now. Okay, I think it's enough.
When I came here, I had the strongest intention to be a funky guy, but eventually something tells me that I will end up as a very grumpy one. Why am I so grumpy? I'm grumpy because yesterday was Black Friday, and on Black Friday, silly me, I went to a football stadium to see a football game between Romania and Sweden in the qualifiers for the European Championships. And on that particular Black Friday, I received the cheapest football playing in the whole year. So Black Friday works also in football. Passing away through this poor experience of mine, I'll come back to my presentation. My presentation is a dual track presentation, one that I prepared and one that I was inspired by my taxi driving to here. The first part is related to what I had last year at the same event. Somehow I want to pick up from where I left the discussion a year ago. That is to prove to all of you that I have very good memory, and very good memories as well with respect to this very nice event. And I'm grateful to Horia and all organizers for inviting me again and again and again. The second part, the second track of my presentation, is devoted to something that was inspired by my walk to this very nice premises. And it has something to do with my intrigue. Why these very nice gentlemen keep on inviting me to speak at such an event? I think they keep on inviting me to speak to such an event because I see things that other people don't. I hear things that other people don't. Of course, for people who see things that other people don't and hear things that other people don't, there are pills and specific institutions. But presuming that I'm mentally healthy, as in justice we presume that we are all innocent until in the court of law we are being proved the opposite. I will try to challenge the very nice and harmonious and positive atmosphere and good vibe that I found here by trying to break it, to crush it, and to destroy it. My mission here is to become uncomfortable. So my first track presentation that picks up from where I have left a year ago is a very chill one. The second track is much nastier. This presentation starts from small essay I've presented a week ago in UK at Oxford in an international conference. And that presentation is called The Market for Ideas and its Test Benches. I try to have some ideas on the intermingled work of scientific pertinence, economic profit, and political permission. Bottom line, my basic question was what makes a good idea good? And a very common answer would be a good idea is good when it's true, that is, passes the test of scientific pertinence, when it brings you some cash, that is, when it's economically profitable to process it and profess it. And of course, nothing would happen if these ideas would not be allowed by political authorities. It's very simple. This very simple framework I had in mind to test economic ideas that are at work nowadays in the very complicated and intricate landscape of economic science, where there are more than one school of thought, everyone claiming that it is in the possession of the ultimate truth. How can we discern what's good and what's fake in their allegations? Particularly, how can we point where free market economics and minimal state politics lie in this landscape of the market for ideas? Unfortunately, my research project is only at the beginning. Okay. Escape. The fourth industrial revolution is against me. No problem. Physical power overrides the digital one. I have imagined those three filters on which we should, against which we should test the value of truth, with or without quotation marks to truth, as being lying, resident in three different dimensions of the market for ideas. One is ex cathedra. I'm a scholar and secondly a journalist. This is a place where I'm most comfortable in. The second one is looking at the market for ideas as some kind of bazaars where we can sell and buy things, amongst which good ideas, either including ideas as factors of production in our enterprises and gaining profit out of this, or producing ideas to be sold in the market and also making profit out of this. And the third is in public agora, where we have political authorities who, from time to time, teach us what should we speak of and what we should be silent until the end of the day. Trying to imagine where the ideas related to free market economics and minimal state politics are being located in this very complex scenery is beyond my power of prediction. I'm only at the beginning of this research project, but somehow I have a very strong feeling that they are not lying at the very core of this diagram, where there supposedly should be present those ideas that are valid scientifically, that are profitable economically, and that are unproblematically from a political point of view. What is particular with social sciences with respect to the test of scientific pertinence is that we try to use in social sciences instruments that are improper to social sciences. We try to mimic the world of physical sciences and the world of engineering. And that's why the truths, or without quotation marks, that come out of these test benches tend to be fundamentally relativistic. That's why we have very diverse and not necessarily sane landscape of economic ideas at work nowadays. When speaking of economic profitability, it's very easy to make profits with poor economic ideas. Just look at the financial crisis, where extremely lousy economic theorizing with respect to monetary policies or the working of the banking system gain huge profits to those who embraced those teachings. Stupidity can give you profits if you have, of course, some safety nets and safety guards with you. With respect to political permission, we are now living in an era of freedom of expression. But this freedom of expression is kind of illusion. We live in an academic realm in which ideas are divided between those who are very comfortable to certain gentlemen and those who are professed and processed by very bizarre characters like myself or some others. That should be kept at the margin of this landscape. That should be give a very tiny amount of exposure in the market. That should be challenged with each and every occasion in which some guy from our part raises a voice and try to address unshakable truths. This is a theme of reflection. I would be very much indebted to you if I can collect over years impression of how this bunch of ideas that we are very attached to try to evolve, pointing to the very center of this diagram, hopefully one day. The second track of my presentation is the uncomfortable one. The particular topic of this debate is what have we in mind with respect to the minimal state and how we should make the state to be as minimum as possible. Bad news, bad breaking news. I'm journalist, break around, and I hate breaking news, but I should give you a breaking news. And my breaking news is there is no such thing as a minimal state. That was never the case. There'll never be the case. And I have empirical and theoretical grounds for this. Theoretical grounds that were very exquisitely exposed by my predecessors in speaking to this very nice event. And I have left to myself a very tough empirical test. And this empirical test meant for me to have a look at the programs of the autumn school from the last, let's say, 10 years. More or less in the last 10 years, we are the same figures. I'm not sure that it's good or bad, but more or less, we're the same figures. So a group of, a gang of 10 to 15 gentlemen and gentle ladies, more or less ladies, I'm not sure that I see ladies here, that somehow experienced a change in their affiliations. 10 years ago, at this very front office of the debate, there were people coming from academia, okay, from the business environment, okay, from NGOs, okay, and from outer space, I don't know. Basically, we were people from the other side, from the state, be it minimal or not. Nowadays, when looking at the same program, at the same gentlemen and gentle ladies, I see things. I see things. I see in the program Minister of Finance. I'm not sure that he attended the event, but eventually he was caught in the program. And a senator of the Parliament of Romania. I see here a member of the lower chamber of the Parliament of Romania. I see here two distinguished gentlemen that are acting as counselors for the Prime Minister of Romania, or orbiting around him. Eventually, they will be filled in the minimal state apparatus. In the same community, we have a very good economist that is counselor of the President of Romania, and also a very great economist who is Romanian representative in Brussels at the representation of Romania to the European Commission, and maybe many others. They are all liberals, be it classical or neoliberals or libertarians or conservatives. They're somehow in and on the right side, with right meaning what is supposed to mean. And my question comes natural. Where is the minimal state? The minimal state substructed so many of us, somehow being bigger rather than minimal. It's a mystery. This is for the empirical test that I applied to the situation with a focus on Romania. Please quote my friends that are absent here. Otherwise, I will call myself. I don't have issues. They are all friends of mine and have a good sense of humor and also a good sense of reality. That's why they chose to play for the right side of the spectrum. And the theoretical test. I was trying to imagine what is a fair filter for discerning what is devoted to minimal state and what is only mere discourse, empty speech. And my theoretical test, and I will want to challenge me if you can find a better one. With respect to minimal state, is not necessarily minimizing the state by simply minimizing the administration. Is in fact a very bad idea, because if a state is fat enough, managing it with only a handful of people doesn't solve anything, only adds to the problem. Too little personnel to a still gross and large Leviathan. Many of us are being informed that being now experiencing a change of administration in Romania. We made very audacious, courageous, brave steps towards minimal state by shrinking the governmental apparatus, by dismissing some nephews or nieces from the administration. I'm not necessarily convinced that is a move in the right direction. For me, the ultimate test to the minimal state is to privatize, to deregulate. At the end of the day, you, in the position of privatizing and deregulating, dismiss yourself from the job. Thank you.
I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical because actually not only classical mass media, but the new media and the social media. Actually, I think I was an optimistic libertarian when this technology came about. I'm not anymore because it seems that the push is still towards centralizing, towards pushing for the state again to do more things and more things and more things. When the public pressure piles up, it always piles up because the public says, you politicians did not do enough. And we all agree here, actually, probably, that exactly the problem is that the politicians do too much, not that they don't do enough. Right? But the pressure through media is for the state to do more, and not only through media, through academia also, through the epistemic communities that we are more or less part of. And I'm not sure if it's a joke, but I want to ask you if we see that socialist ideas are way more successful on in the market of ideas, doesn't that mean that socialists are actually right in the sense that there is such a thing as bad market failure?
Which is the following. Over the last few decades, more and more increasingly, the left and the state became the same. That is, if half of the workforce is employed by the state, including academia, for instance, they are going to promote the ideas which continue to support the role of the state, which even increase the role of the state. Sometimes media, I would think it is neutral to this, but in fact it is not, because it is being fed with this information and with this kind of opinions. It is important that, as a conclusion, the left and the statists are no more different anymore. Media can act also in the other direction. Just think about what they said about the market for ideas, about the ideas which do not appear in it. If media would have the mind of Radu on what he said, it would probably act towards state minimization and not against it. But this is not the case. So,
as I understand, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said people tend to be dependent on something or something else. If people are not dependent on the institutions of state, they will become dependent on something else. Correct? Well, I think it's far better to be for the people to be dependent on different organizations, on different things. It's not that bad if people become dependent on, let's say, churches, on different type of organizations of or the family and so on. Hayekian idea would be that we can see competition among all these kind of institutions that people become dependent on. So it's not that bad. It's a far worse situation when you have a couple of institutions that all our lives depend on.
Let me phrase it like this. You have on one side current internet, okay, like Facebook and stuff like that, where the data is owned by them directly. And if somehow, because of information asymmetry and stuff like that, somebody from there decides to sell all the data to Cambridge Analytica and what so on and so forth, okay, the idea in blockchain is that that data is owned by you. The institution doesn't have a database with your data. What you can do with zero knowledge proofs, for example, what this means is a mathematical theorem from cryptography that allows you to prove that you have certain info without disclosing that info. So the simplest example is like now when the policeman stops you when you're driving the car and asks for your license, when giving your license, you also reveal your name, your address, and all kind of private data, because this is how it is. He can read it. With zero knowledge proofs, you can just prove to him that you have a valid license, and that's it. And he won't have access to your name. He won't have access to any other information. So this is mathematics. It's not like you are reconstructing blockchain on the framework of pre-blockchain databases. what you told is about how Facebook works, what Google works, and you just assume that blockchain is. Yeah, you said you can trace everything on blockchain. How? Okay, how?
I work for the tech guy. The problem is, in the beginning we assumed that stuff we bought on the Silk Road.
No, I'm not talking about Silk Road, but you know how it was traced, okay? Because in the end, you have to go to a bank and somehow get that money. Own all your rights and assets in private information encrypted on your side. And when an institution needs certain proof from you that you hold some title, you just send him that proof. The point in this keeping private data is basically this: you can use this kind of distributed ledger to guarantee that there is no third party who has privileged access to your data in current databases. The super admin basically can do stuff, okay? In blockchain, in a distributed ledger, you don't have such an individual, such a role. There is no one there. They need to have a consensus. They need to have a majority among half of the network to be able to do stuff, okay? So basically, okay, you can brute force find out someone's key. This is another question, but the network itself, you don't have special privileged power. Like the government cannot enter the super password and find out your info. And this is at least marginally better than what you have now.
It's a lot better. But,
okay,
you still.
It's not perfect. I don't claim it's perfect.
But sorry, I just want to throw this other idea here. We have, the Russians and the Chinese, the government, they're putting a lot of money into getting more network power. And, on the tech side, we're worried about this because the idea is fantastic, but then you see some, Russian oligarch putting a couple of billion into this. And, then we go from me being 0.1% of the network and being very happy with that because there's nobody who is more, to some guy in Russia who's, you can see him at 22, 23%.
Yeah, it's like economic power, it's like 1% will have 99% of the power. It's the same logic like in economy. But this is specifically for certain instantiations, like in Bitcoin. If China and Russia will get 70% of the hash power, they will basically be able to write their own history. But there are different kinds of proof of stake, whatever. You can make different algorithms that can block this kind of by design. But as Bitcoin is working now, yeah, it's possible. You have more. If you have more than half the power, you can basically decide what is true. So it's clear that if you manage to have this kind of technology that greatly reduce the transaction costs, if you have an authoritarian regime like China, it will be the perfect big brother, okay? Because they can put certain rules, like you said, but it's only in the rules. So not the technology goes there. But in this case, what kind of rules and what kind of institution you design there? If you design a set of rules to promote privacy and liberty, you can. But the same technology can be used by the big brother to do the perfect big brother. I mean, I agree with you on the first part, but it's not in the technology, it's in the rules that you, and yes, the risk is there. You can think the rules are good, but the rules are tricky.
One obvious problem, and many critics of the minimal state from the anarchist camp of libertarianism have argued quite convincingly, probably. I think that one problem with the minimal state is that it's very unlikely to be stable. So once you have a state, be it minimal, be it ultra minimal, that would be something like less than minimal. It's again a technical description for that. Once you have a state, it's doomed to grow because of the logic that Horia explained earlier. And so if If there's no way to have a minimal state that remains as such for more than 2 seconds, then why argue for the minimal state? It seems to make no sense. Either you go into the anarchy camp and you say, okay, so because a small state cannot be stable, it's in states' natures to grow continuously, then the only solution is to not have a state at all, or go into the camp that says, okay, since we cannot maintain a stable minimal state, then, or it's very hard to do, or almost impossible to do that, then let's look on a step-by-step sector, each policy imparts you what the state can or cannot do, what's acceptable, not acceptable, and maybe admit some functions that are more than minimal, and hopefully gather enough public support to stop it there. Unlikely in practice, but that would be the hope, at least.
I'm really sure that there is something as technocracy really existing in the world. From my opinion, and you're free to contradict and to argue with me, is like technocrats are the kind of creatures that are marvelous and mythical as well. They are like unicorns. For me, when you speak about a technocrat, what catches my attention is not the techno, is the crat. The crat means that they are somehow their political power comes from somewhere. They are accountable to politicians in the ultimate sense. They have a line of command. They have a chain of command. There's something that is only a small piece in a puzzle in which their power is either an illusion or non-existent from the outset. There's no such thing as a technocrat that is chosen even by a democratic parliament, because parliament is staffed with politicians, and politicians are politicians in each and every moment of their life, even when they elect or mandate a technocratic government. So it's in the most charitable reading of the situation is a difference, a small, a tiny, itsy bitsy tiny weeny difference of degree, not nature. This is my opinion. I don't believe in technocracy as a serious alternative, because it's not an alternative. It's power, and is as powerful as the state is as big as the state is as minimal as the state is. It's not something different. A political government is technocratic because someone does the technical stuff there. So they have membership ID with a political party stamp on it, and the technocrats do not have that, but obey the same rules, obey the same orders, do the same things, and shake their head in front of the politicians, as in the case of the colleagues of party in a political regular government. This is a small reply, which is, I think, comes under the air of my grumpy attitude. With it, I've come stuck at this meeting. But I also have a free air message, if I can have free air in myself. The one part is being represented by some books I brought to you. There are some reports, very thick reports. Is a report for bodybuilders and fitness freaks. They exhausted me. I have 10 pieces. I'm shaken by their carriage. They're put somewhere on the bar. If you like to have a whiskey glass, you have. I would strongly recommend to have a whiskey on the books, not a whiskey on the rocks. At the end of the day, only at the end of the day. And the second invitation of mine is a message I always deliver when participating in this kind of events. Please do not find this very nice gathering at the ultimate point in some chain of events. The most important things happen outside the room. Please be sure that some of the messages, if not all of the messages from here, reach outside in the street, brought by you wherever you work and live. Please think of this room not necessarily as a gathering room, but as an escape room. This is an escape room. Please make ideas from here escape out there. And I have an invitation. I said something about the magazine I run. It's the Market for Ideas magazine. And its main campaign is labeled Bridging News. We are against breaking news. We are rather accustomed with bridging news. And we bridging news by bridging professions. We bridge generations. We have professors and students side by side, publishing columns one next to each other. We have people from Romania and more than 50 other countries writing in this magazine. And we have readers from more than 192 countries and territories all over the world without investing a single penny in marketing techniques that buy and sell readers or audiences, fake audiences. So it's a very sincere invitation. If you want to use a strategy of escape room, please use the Market for Ideas. You may have a look just by Googling it. The marketforideas.com is the magazine. And I know some of you already make this step, and I'm very indebted to your effort and good pieces of writing and reading as well. So have in mind that this gathering should pay off somehow. It's not just for socializing, but of spreading the ideas outside the walls and windows and doors and perimeter of these premises.
Well, I consider that we fairly explored the perspectives of the minimal state, both the good and the bad ones, the dangerous ones as well. And if there are no more questions, I propose that we close the debate at this point and then go further with our program. It's closed.